Welcome to the Invincible Innovation Show, the podcast for changemakers. Each week, I talk to the most fascinating entrepreneurs and innovation leaders about innovation, strategy, and design. Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about the best first thing to do to be more innovative with company. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm glad to see you all. I'm Mazor, Kario, product innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And I have a very special guest with me, Costa. Hi, Costa.
Hi, Adi.
So Costa Michailidis is the founder at Innovation Bound. And Costa's goal is to teach 1 million people how to use their creativity to solve their toughest and most important challenges. Wow, it sounds really good.
Yeah, that's the mission I'm on. I've been doing it as a consultant for big businesses and scientific labs, but all the stuff that we teach there is relevant to anybody who has a complex problem they're trying to solve. So my mission is, can we make this stuff accessible to people who don't have a big consulting budget? Moms, teachers, chefs, small business entrepreneurs, etc.
Great. And we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to join the discussion and ask questions. And now we can start. So innovation is, as I see it, is a really big buzzword. And I want to hear how you see innovation. How would you define it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a buzzword. A very simple definition to use is something which is both new and useful. If something's new and useful, those two things combined, we tend to call that thing an innovation. We accept that the iPhone is more innovative than a ham sandwich. That's the line.
Yeah.
Unless the ham sandwich is 3D printed and we feed it to astronauts. Well, now you're talking about something new and useful. 3D printed space ham sandwiches. So now that's an innovation again. The point being, something that's new and useful makes it innovative. It's also a verb. So that's the noun. The verb is to produce something which is new and useful. So we talk about innovation processes, design thinking, agile, creative problem solving, even the scientific method to an extent is an innovation process. So that's the verb. To innovate means to create an innovation. Those are simple definitions. Best thing to do is define it for yourself. Understand where it applies in your life. Come up with your own understanding.
So do you think that there are some people who are like born to be innovative and some of them are like, they cannot do it that well?
No, I think we're all born. So there are some human essentials that we all have. We're all born with desire, with the capacity to love, with creativity. We are risk-seeking, adventurous little creatures when we're born, right? We're also all born different. Right? Different sizes, shapes, different temperaments, different personalities. And those differences can be really useful when it comes to the new part of innovative. How do you come up with something new? Well, you leverage the way in which you're different. That's one good strategy. So the essentials, we're all born with the essentials. There's work to do, of course, but I don't think anybody's born like without the capacity to innovate, save maybe if you're born into a coma. And then I don't know that anybody knows what your experience is like. So I think we should include that edge case.
I think you're right, because all kids are very creative. The fact that they don't know, it's like they're so curious and they want to know, and they're always like thinking out of the box because they don't know the box. So for them, it's like natural to be creative.
And I think that's Picasso's famous quote, right? We're all born artists. The problem's to remain as an artist as we get older. Something like that. I don't know if I have
that. Yeah, it makes sense. And the when going to school and going like through the path of life, what's meant for us, we're being more, I would say, going with the rules or going with the status quo, and then being less creative, less being individual, less thinking for ourselves, thinking differently, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is a real challenge for children growing up, for humans growing up, to find balance between learning how to live in a society, in a family, in a friendship. There are ways in which you have to bend, flex, compromise, conform, and those are all useful skills. Social skills are about understanding the other person's experience and catering to them to an extent. They're also about honest expression of oneself. And so in all that, you can lose your creativity. And so it's a
Yeah.
fun balance to grow up and try to do. It's also fun if you don't balance it and you lose your creativity and someone told you you sing like a chimpanzee and you took it seriously and you stopped singing forever. And then when you're 19 and you're in a crazy relationship and the person tells you, actually, you have a beautiful voice, and the whole thing comes back for you and your creativity reawakens. Some people have that story. And it's a beautiful story to find your creativity again.
Yeah, I think that the question is, do we stick to what is important for us? And if creativity and even creation in like creating new things is so important for you, and you want to be curious and to think about what could be, I think you stay a bit more creative than, okay, like we know what's gonna be, we know what is needed, we know what is demanded from us, we know what is expected from us, and then we go to be more and more narrow, actually.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you see it like in the way that we teach our kids. I have 4 kids, and I think about it a lot. What do they need in order to really succeed in life? And always when I talk to people on my show, they always say like being curious, be creative. But when they go to school, it's like the opposite. You shouldn't be curious. You should not be creative. You should do what you're told to learn, you're told to produce. That's it. Right?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Our society tends toward critical thinking, tends toward conformity, tends toward have to and narrow focuses, more than is useful in our modern world. I think with automation and AI, the creative tasks are now in abundance. We're demanding a lot of creativity of people, and we have this education system and society that isn't designed to produce it. So I think you're 100% right. There's a mismatch there.
Yeah, I think that most people, when they think about what is a good profession, they would go with something very strict, right? Like being a coder and going to be in high tech, which is, it could be creative. It's not saying that you couldn't be creative as a coder, but it's like very specific and it's very definitive, right? It's 0 and 1, and if you make a mistake, you should find it. But that's not a good thing, right? But in general, the people who create the future for us are the entrepreneurs, which are usually thinking differently or doing things differently or want to do things in a total new direction, right? Which is not what we teach our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way I like to think about innovation and the societal sort of benefit and all of that is there's breakthrough innovation. So there are people who do the the $1 billion breakthrough or whatever it is. They take us to space for the first time, or they invent a new thing. And you don't even need high tech for this example. If you zoom backward in history all the way to prehistoric times, someone somewhere probably, quote, invented music, or someone did it for the first time. But is the breakthrough innovation where the value was, or is it every song, lyric, rhyme, rap, beatbox since then? That's where the value is. And those are the everyday innovations. So you could think of it as like invention gets us going, and innovation provides all of the richness and breadth that we get from that. So we have people in our society who will unlock teams. Really, no individual does this. Teams of people who will unlock those doors and create new possibilities. And then we have the everyday innovation that we get to do as a result of there being this whole new direction we can go in: space, synthetic biology, whatever else.
Do you have the feeling that sometimes people create something or invent something just because they could, and just because it's like it could be done, not because it should be done sometimes?
Yes. Okay. So 2019 in the springtime, February 2019, I think is the date. I worked on a project for the National Science Foundation. And it was on synthetic biology. The event was called Building Synthetic Cells. And so the effort was to generate research ideas, 5-day event, 30 scientists, forming teams, coming up with research ideas, lots of fun. Shark Tank at the end, there's a whole bunch of money on the line. And the ones that succeed, and then they go through a grant process. So they go through all the formal proceedings, but the event is where the action was at. The winners got funding. They got grant funding to do their science research. And so the theme of building synthetic cells, like just because we can, should we, was very prevalent. We had 3 ethicists in the room like scientists whose background is ethics, bioethics, et cetera. So we bake in the ethics when we do stuff like this. And it's important to do so because, you go back 80 years and you think about nuclear weapons and you go, oh, should we not have, should we have done that differently? You have a lot of really serious questions. Just because we can't doesn't necessarily mean we should. Now, do or don't is too narrow. You have to think about all of the different ways in which you can do something. There's gonna be one or two or three or more ethical ways to pursue something. It's not necessarily about do or don't. That's rather limiting when we look at things as black or white. But yeah, certainly you have to bring ethics in the room when you do stuff like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned
firsthand.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sometimes I feel that people are so enthusiastic about the fact that something is new and it's innovative. Well, wow, we've never done it, but does it mean that it's good for us? Does it mean that we should do it? Does it mean that the implications would be good for the users or for people who just like for society even?
Yeah, something as harmless as social media has created an anxiety crisis among young girls in certain countries. And that's it's a pretty good example because, it's social media, it's harmless. It's like, no, it's not harmless. Yeah. It's quite harmful. Yeah. Here's the measurement. And that's just a simple example, never mind, hard tech innovations. What's another good example? Anyway, I'll roll it in my head and come back at you later in the podcast.
When we have like something which is new, sometimes we misuse it, and afterwards we elaborate it for something else. For example, if I'm not mistaken, the print, the first time they invented the print, they did not use it for news or for scientific journals. It's more for common things like gossip and even porn, I think. That was what it was used at the beginning. So maybe we're just in the beginning of some of these technologies, and then we'll know. I truly hope. I don't know.
That makes sense. I mean, look at what we did with the internet. A whole new medium. What do? We filled it with, gossip and porn and whatever else, to the point where most people thought no normal person would ever put their credit card or their real name on the internet. It was this big fear in the 90s. And then was the famous economist, Paul Krugman. He's a Nobel-winning economist. I think he said, when all this is said and done, we'll see that the internet has had as much of an effect on society as the fax machine. It's like, oh my God, no one's ever been more wrong.
Let's see what could be there. So you just mentioned that you're working with companies, and the name of our podcast is the first thing you should do to be more innovative company. So That's the name, and we should answer that if we call the podcast this way, right? So what is it? What's the first thing?
Absolutely. So it's a big space. There are a lot of consultants, there are a lot of experts, there's people who've done it in their own companies, and there are different recommendations that are out there, and they change over the years. What we've found works really well is something called, we basically mine for stories. We look for stories inside of the company. This work was pioneered by Ismet Mamnoon, Izzy, on our team. She did really, really beautiful work on this. And so the idea is that inside any organizational culture, there's already a little bit of innovation happening, at least. There might be a lot. You don't know really until you look. And what you're looking for are stories about people in the company using their creativity to solve problems. And storytelling is easy and fun, and every humans that we used to sit around campfires 10,000 years ago. It's an easy way to access sort of what's actually going on. You ask for stories, and you ask for stories about people using creativity to solve problems. That's the easiest way to do it. You don't need the word innovation. You don't need anything, buzzwords. You don't need anything super complex. It's just about where are people already using their creativity to solve problems. And what you'll find is a couple of things. You'll find who is doing it. You'll find how they're doing it, what processes they're using. You'll find out which resources they're leaning on to get it done. You'll find out culturally things like, why are they doing it? What's their motive? What are their values that they're operating from in order to do that? And what you see is a very opaque sketch of what your innovation culture is already like. So before you hire the consultants who know what the innovation, the big cultural organizational change initiatives, before you go investing in some madness like that, just ask for stories. Figure out how people are already doing it in your company. And then look at who, how, look at the resources they use, look at why they do it, and look at the outcomes. Look at the specific outcomes that they're producing by using creativity to solve problems. And you'll see where you're already getting started. This is more of an organic approach, right? You see how you're doing it, and then you grow from there. So that's the best.
Could you give us an example for that? Give us a good story.
Yeah, sure. Like somewhere like AOL, this is from work from a long time ago. Somewhere at AOL was quite chaotic. And so AOL literally brought America online. They followed through on their brand promise. They did it. It's on them, which is really cool and celebratory. They made a bunch of money in the process, and then they went and they got old and stale, and other internet companies came up, and Amazon and Google and blah blah blah. AOL had a bunch of money because they had successfully done their thing, sold a bunch of ads, and collected a big pile of cash. And they started buying a bunch of different online outlets. Huffington Post is something that AOL owns, and there's a bunch of other small media internet companies and so forth. So you're talking about a big company with a lot of legacy, and then a whole bunch of little companies inside of it. And that was the environment. And so if we weren't doing mining stories back then. We were doing other things. But if we were to go look at the stories based on the experience I had with the people there, you would have found that there are lots of projects going on in lots of different directions, producing lots of different outcomes. It was quite chaotic. There's good in that chaos, but there's also like, what's the strategy? How does all this come together? Like they could have easily just spun things out left and right in different directions. It isn't necessarily something that's directable the way most organizations you can like pivot, have a strategy, follow a plan, et cetera. And that chaos was somewhat problematic. That said, a lot of creativity, a lot of potential, a lot of encouragement for doing new things, lots of rewards for it. This is partly to reflect the CEO at the time, the sort of personality of the CEO, which has a lot of impact. Doesn't have to be. Cultures are sometimes defined top down, sometimes not. So that's one example. The other typical one that you see is a whole lot of risk aversion. So the people using creativity to solve problems only when they have to. They're facing this problem. Manager never told them how to solve it. They're scared to ask. So this is when they deploy their creativity. So it's very sort of hushed and not rewarded. But the results they produce are improvements in efficiency. Or improvements in costs or something else like that. So you have these highly risk-averse giant corporate cultures. That's another very common sort of style of creativity that you'll find. In those, what we would do is if you're training sort of frontline people, you would teach them to build credibility with their bosses, managers, colleagues around particular ideas. You would teach them to do stealth innovation. They would be doing it, without some top-down, strategy in place. And that's okay. It's a good way to start. If you're seeking to really be a disruptor, to really be a big disruptor in your marketplace, then that's not going to cut it. But it's a useful way to invite sort of front lines to start. If you're working with executives top-down, then you do something else. Those are two examples.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And you mentioned creativity several times. Do you think it's so important for innovation, and why?
Yeah, creativity is the core of innovation. Creativity is something we're all born with. It can look different from person to person, but that's what makes it beautiful, what makes it work. It gets punished, as we've talked about in schools traditionally. As you go through an education process, it's always recoverable. It's always there. And creativity is a set of skills, because we use that word when we talk about 1 skill, 2 skills, 10 skills. It's really hard to sort of pinpoint. So let's say creativity is a capability. It's a group of skills that you can deploy, including thinking differently, like asking questions that don't typically get asked. That might be a specific part of creativity. Another part might be imagination and the ability to generate lots and lots of ideas or possibilities. That's another kind of component of it. Another one might be identifying assumptions that you have and breaking or changing those assumptions so that you could take a new perspective or think outside the box. These are sort of phrases we use. And they all lump under this phrase, creativity, and they're all generative skills. So creativity is a generative capability that we have. We use it to generate new perspectives, to generate new ideas, to generate different styles of thinking, et cetera. So it's a set of skills that we all have. We're born with them to an extent, and you can train them and make them better. Like you can train the individual skills and get better at them. And they're all quite generative. If you understand creativity, you also, by extension, understand critical thinking. Critical thinking is that's the thing we were all taught in school. And, if we passed our classes, we understood. Critical thinking is the reductive approach, the deductive approach. It's you look at all that giant pile of ideas you generated and you go, which ones are most likely to work? Let's evaluate these. Let's rank these. Let's select the ones that work the best. Let's think which of these possibilities is the root cause of the problem. This one, most likely. Okay, let's work on solving that one. Critical thinking in this way is directive, is reductive, is evaluative, is selective. So in the psychology literature, you will find the words divergent thinking and convergent thinking. In layman's terms, you find the word creativity or creative thinking and critical thinking or evaluative thinking or something like that. And we're really talking about that going out, go back in, go back out, go back in. So generate lots of possibilities, pick the ones that work best. Generate lots of possibilities, pick the one that works best. I call that the heartbeat of creativity, or the heartbeat of innovation.
Yeah. It reminds me of my first degree is in design. My second degree is in cognitive science, and I always love to learn about it. So I heard the podcast not long ago, and he mentioned about researching very creative, artistic people, and they measured their brain creativity and capabilities, and what are the structures that are working in the brain while they're creating something. Let's say I write a new poem, whatever. So these people are aware of the capacity of going outside, searching for the ideas and going and looking for things and then creating and then coming back to where they're doing and then fixing it, which is very, very similar to what you're saying. Like you go outside and you have so many ideas, but in the end, you need to be critical about your creation. And what they are different from other people is that they can do it in parallel. So they can do both things really fast, going from being very open-minded to being very critical. And this is the way that they create music and poems and literature and whatever, and songs and all of that.
Yeah, the science around this is fascinating. So when we teach this stuff and we train people, it's a very frontal lobe kind of an exercise. It's very cognitive. We're having people actively do this stuff. So with the scientists we mentioned earlier, building synthetic cells, we had them come up with probably 150, maybe 200 potential research ideas. These were like 1 or 2 sentences on a Post-it note on the wall. So they came up with a couple of 100, 150, maybe 200, somewhere in there, potential ideas. And then they selected the ones that were going to work the best. But if you go look at improv theater and you watch improv performers, it's like they do that whole hours-long process in their head instantly, and they give you the funniest joke possible. And then they do it again a second later. And then again, it's like, how could they possibly be doing it that fast? So that's a huge and interesting mystery in the neuroscience part of this.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes these very, very creative people, they do find everybody grows up and finds their niche, right? More or less. But it seems that when you're growing up, or when you're going through the educational system, at least, it's like things that you were never taught and they were never really appreciated, right? Like being a comic, the ones who are the class clowns. This is what they're doing. But
they were punished.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. It's like, this is not what you're supposed to do. But these people who did persist with it, maybe they found themselves doing it more. So I want to ask you about the 5 foundational habits of great innovators.
Yeah. So this is part of the course I'm building. It's called Innovation 101. And the 5 habits that we focus on. So we talk about habits, first of all, because everybody's got hidden superpowers. One of them that's really cool is called the mammalian diving reflex. This is about breath hold diving. This is free diving, which is really cool, which I've gotten into over the last many years. And it's accessible instantly. Like in a 2-day class, you can get to a 3-minute breath hold and a 65-foot or a a 20-meter dive. And it's insane how quickly you can access this superpower. These are aquatic adaptations that we all have. You could be born in the mountains, you could live in the desert, doesn't matter. You still have these inbuilt adaptations for the sea. Creativity is another one of those. It's this superpower hidden inside of you that you've always had that you can access. You can't like instantly do it at super high performance or like performance that would surprise people. Like you can't expect on day one to blow yourself away with your own creativity. It happens occasionally, but I can't lead with that with a group and be like, you're going to do something you never thought you could do. And like day one, if you give me 5 days, I can get people there. But in 1 day, it's a lot harder. So habits are the path to being just masterful innovators. You have to actually develop the habits and build skill over time. The 5 skills that I think are best to focus on at first are taken from what I've seen in the field with business leaders and scientists. They're also taken from some research I've done around the Wright brothers and some innovators from the past, Tesla, et cetera. They're great innovators over history. And you see these examples. Picasso's another one. The first is come up with lots of ideas. Great innovators have this habit. They generate lots of ideas. If you look at Da Vinci's notebooks or Picasso's art, Picasso had like 40,000 works of art or something insane. It came out to like 2 per day. Or 1 every 2 days, something like that, where it was like, how do you produce that much art? Who else? There's a lot of examples of this. So come up with lots of ideas. We could dive deep on this one on the podcast, and I can show people, like I can show you how this one works. Just to go over the other ones.
It reminds me this 10,000 hours of training for sports people. It's like they need to do it again and again, right? And the same, I've been like master class. So I have
yes, I've taken some.
Yeah, I've taken some of them. So many of the writers there, they always indicate you should write. Even if you're feeling blocked, you should write and write and write. You could fix this afterwards, but you need to create something. And you could go from there. Maybe some of it will not be relevant for you afterwards, but this like creation and being proactive helps you to get to where you want, instead of like just thinking about, I cannot do it. I cannot like make this sentence or this part is not working. I would stop. So I think it's very similar to what you're saying.
Absolutely. Writer's block is such an interesting one. I've definitely had the experience of like not having that issue. I've had it like when I was younger, I think because you get forced to write about things you don't want to write about.
To do many things you're not supposed to really enjoy. So that's why.
That part can be challenging. And then I think when you find your way to writing that you're interested in doing, that helps a lot to eliminate writer's block. And then the creativity training, I think, has a pretty tremendous effect on reducing writer's block. Namely deferring judgment. One of the things we try to teach people to do is when you're in the creative mode, be in the creative mode, and then you switch and you're in the critical thinking mode and you stay in the critical thinking mode. And then you can learn how to flip back and forth later. What's important at first is to get out of the critical thing. So defer your judgment. Don't judge it. Just come up with ideas. So to flip back, the other 4 habits are using feedback to improve ideas. This is playing angel's advocate, as my teammate Maggie likes to say, as opposed to devil's advocate, which we're all so skilled at and has almost no value. So playing angel's advocate, use feedback to improve ideas. There's asking the right questions, and namely the else question. So you can do the journalistic questions, right? Who, what, how, when, et cetera, if you want to understand the context or the problem. But you might also ask who else, what else, why else, how else? And if you keep asking the else question, you start to get breadth. And that's what's referred to as lateral thinking. You start to get many, many views on the problem, not just the first one. Why would the first one be the best one? It's like get 10 perspectives on the problem, then you'll have a lot more rich and understanding.
It's like instead of having black and white, you have so many other grays. And it could work in many other aspects. Like even if you communicate with a person and you think differently than him, you could say, what else could we agree on, instead of like being oppositional? And like
Absolutely.
You think A, I think B, and that's it, right? So it opens your mind to other people and other ideas, other possibilities in that sense.
Absolutely. When we get tactical in innovation, we generally ask 2 questions. Why is this important? what's stopping you? And then again, why else is this important? What else is stopping you? And so when you're asking, why is this important? You're asking for the motives and the rationale behind a particular problem. So I'm broke and unemployed and I need a job. Okay, well, why is this important for you to solve? It's like, well, because I'm bored. Oh, okay. Or because I need to feed my family, or because like those are different and you should understand the motives. Okay, what's stopping you from getting a job? I don't know if I'm connected to a network of people that are passionate about what I'm passionate about. Oh, okay, networking, cool. Or I don't know that my resume is really up to par. Oh, well, let's clean up the resume. And so you can start to map out a problem using those two questions. Why is this important? What's stopping you? And you keep asking those questions and you build a mind map. That's asking the right questions. There's two more. Test early and often. There's some seminal work done by Steve Blank and Eric Ries, packaged in a book called Lean Startup. They focus on startups and entrepreneurship, but the ideas are applicable everywhere. And namely, you want to test early and often. You don't want to build a $1 billion prototype and then have your first user. That's a recipe for disaster. You want to build a $1 million prototype or a $10,000 prototype, or cheaper if you can get away with it, and then expose that to a user and learn. And you want to kind of co-create with whoever this product is intended to serve. In some instances, of course, that's really challenging. You're talking about large infrastructure projects and so forth.
Sure.
There are other ways to test there, not direct exposure with users. There are other ways to do that. But you always have to test early and often, run the experiments, do the learning. The point being, if you're setting out to innovate, to do something that's never been done before, or that hasn't been done by you, you're going to have to try things you've never tried, which means you're going to have to learn. And so you just take off the success hat, the achievement hat, you throw it in the trash, or you put it on the side, you bring it back later. And then you put on the learner hat and you go, okay, I'm trying to do something I've never done. I'm going to try stuff and see what I learn. I'm trying very hard not to use the word mistake, because the whole point is you don't think about them like mistakes. That's not the orientation. It's try stuff, produce a result, look at the result, adjust. So that's test early and often. Lastly, even the most skilled, masterful innovators do all of that, and then stuff still changes once reality, comes into play. So the last one is be ready to improvise or be ready to adapt. And the idea is that once you get into implementation, the prototypes and the plan and the experiments, yeah, okay, it all got you here. But if something changes, you're going to have to figure it out on the fly, and sometimes quite quickly. And so be ready to adapt and improvise is number 5. And the idea is if you practice these 5 things, you will tend to be more innovative. You will become innovation bound. You'll be bound to innovate. That's the idea.
Yeah. So I have 2 questions about it. First, I think that one of the fundamental things is to get to know for an answer, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur. What do you think about that? That was the first thing. And second, if we're talking about big established corporations who are not that used to doing things differently, and they do punish people who are wrong and doing mistakes, how do you teach them to do that?
Yeah, there is such thing as a mistake that should be punished. So it's not about, changing the culture so mistakes are more acceptable. It's like, no. It's just about understanding there's 2 different things. There's productivity. And if you're in a mode where you need to be productive and there's a known way to do that, great, do it. Don't make mistakes. Don't take risk. Have as streamlined and efficient a process as you can. That's incredible. That's fantastic. Then there's creativity over here, and that's a different mode. So productivity versus creativity. In the creative mode, you need to be able to think in terms of learning. And that means, like, again, I struggle not to use the word mistake. It means changing your orientation so that you're not looking like there's no right answer if you're developing a new product. You should be thinking about it as exploring the possibility of a new product. Good, go explore. Know what you want to learn. Try and learn as cheaply, quickly, and safely as you can. And if you can do that, you basically beat the competition. And the reason is because you can innovate faster. Why can you innovate faster? Because you can learn more cheaply, quickly, and safely than the competition. You're at that point, you're basically unbeatable. If you do it fast, cheap, and safe, then you're innovating at lightning speed. But in order to do that, you can't adopt the productive mindset Like you can't task people with build this product and give it to this marketplace. Like, do you know if that marketplace wants that product? For sure. And to know for sure, they have to have already bought it. And if they haven't already bought it, then you don't know. You hypothesize, which is fine. Have a hypothesis, go test it. But for bosses and leaders to have this expectation, of people they task to do something when there are unknowns, that's probably not right. War contexts are different. So sometimes you have existential context. It's like, we have to do this or we die, or the business dies or the society dies. So that's a war context. If you're in that context, of course, then it doesn't matter. And firing people is absolutely the sufficient way to do it. You task somebody, this is the goal, don't care how you do it, get it done. And then they either get it done or not. You give them a month, and at the end of the month, they haven't done it. You fire them, try someone else. And at that point, you're really just swapping people out until you find one that can get the job done. And you basically need a testable amount of time. Is it a month? Is it 2 months? Like, what's the appropriate amount of time to give them? And once they've had that, then you kick them out, try the next person. And that's okay, because you're talking about existential situations. So there are always edge cases.
Yeah. So I asked you what about the habit of getting a no for an answer?
I'm not familiar. Is this where you keep trying to sell it until somebody says no?
No, it's like getting used to the fact that sometimes, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you will hear no. And people, even inside an organization, if you want to drive something which is new, you would have a position. People will tell you, no, we cannot do it. We've never done it. It's too risky. It's too hard. You will get a no, and you need to be accustomed to that.
Yeah. So absolutely. I went to high school as a boy. I heard no a lot from all the girls. So I'm well trained from a young age. So I guess I don't necessarily come with a lot of shame. So no hard personal experience to rely on. Doing sales is another way. So if you've ever done a sales job, you will hear no a million times and yes once. So yeah, that seems like a useful skill. When you're doing innovation, it's probably okay to orient with socializing your ideas, building credibility slowly. So instead of going to your boss and saying something like, I have a new idea I want to do. I need $20,000. Will you, give me a budget so I can try this? It's like, no, they're not going to give you a $20,000 budget to try a new thing. That's crazy. Depending on the level, right? So if you're 3 levels up from there, then the $2 million ask is the crazy one. The point is to move in small steps. And so if you really love this idea and you really love your company and you want to do it here, then what you might want to do is you look at it and you go, okay, well, what would I do first? Like, what are my first steps? Let me take those first steps. I'll say, hey, to my boss, I have this thought about how to improve our process. Here's what I've done so far. It's a sort of 1-page description with a few things to test out. I've done the first test. Here's the result I got. Can I use an hour every Friday from now on to explore the other ones? I think we can do a 10% efficiency gain or a 100% efficiency gain, whatever it is. Sorry, can't do 100% efficiency gain by definition. And they'll say, sure, okay, yeah, you can use an hour on Fridays. That's really cool. And then you make progress and you share your progress and you ask for the next thing and you do it incrementally. I think that tends to be more effective than, pitching, hearing no, pitching, hearing no, pitching, hearing no. But yeah, I don't know. I say it with hesitation.
I think it's a difference between being an entrepreneur, everything outside, like having a startup, than being within a hierarchical situation within the company, and you're just new in the company and you're very low in the hierarchy. So it's really, really different. So I have like 2 more questions because we don't have that much time and we have many more. So can you test our audience creativity right now?
Yes. Okay. This is a fun one. So put up 3 fingers and think of 3 superpowers. What could be some interesting superpowers to have? And if you think of those, let me know if you're ready. And you do it too, so we can actually have an example.
So do you want me to tell you, or it's like inside of your own thinking?
Yeah, just think for now. Tell me when you have 3 of them.
Okay.
All right. So now I'm going to call out some superpowers. And if I say something that you're thinking of, you put a finger down. Make sense? Okay. Flying, super speed, super strength, traveling through time, controlling minds, talking to animals, breathing underwater, teleportation, walking through walls, climbing on walls, super strength, super speed. What are some other ones? I'm forgetting that there's a standard list, but that's all I've got. Okay, so we got one of yours. What are the other two?
The ability to laugh really, really hard.
Oh, nice.
I think it's like a superpower.
Great.
And really understanding people to their depth, like really understanding where does it come from? Not only mind reading, but really understanding where is the beginning of everything. How does it
Very
what
cool.
is like the concept? Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool. Okay, so this is just a fun test, and the number of fingers you have remaining up are each, accent marks for your own creativity. So the lesson here is pretty straightforward. Actually, partly straightforward and then partly really interesting. So the straightforward part is when you try to come up with ideas for something, your mind reaches for the easy places first. And so when you think about superpowers, it's like, well, what Marvel movie did you see recently? Or what did you read in comic books when you were a kid, in whatever your culture is, small cultural differences. And so for that reason, when we say come up with lots of ideas, one of the things we're doing is in a large list of ideas, you have a higher chance of having something new in there. But it goes beyond that. What happens when you generate a long list of ideas is you force your mind to go to weirder and weirder and more novel and more interesting places as you go on. So at first, flying, super speed, super strength, breathing underwater, traveling through time, controlling time, teleportation, blah, blah, things we've heard and seen. And then you start to get weird and interesting. And then as you keep going, you get more originality and you get higher concentrations of really interesting ideas. So you have like a super empathy that you talked about, really understanding people in their depth. You have the ability to grow any vegetable you want in your beard, the ability to harness political apathy as a renewable source of energy. These are some fun examples from when we've done it in the past. You get to really interesting things as you go on, and you have higher concentrations of interesting things as you go on. So the statistics help you, and then you get better and better results as you go, like you get compound interest, so to speak. And then the last thing is you get training. So as you do this, you teach your mind to look in novel places for answers to questions. And so there are two that have been research founded. The third one is my hypothesis, but potentially three different ways in which coming up with lots of ideas benefits you when you need imagination. There are, of course, times you do not need imagination. It's about productivity. It's okay, just be efficient, get the work done. That's totally acceptable. We don't have to be creative in every part of our lives.
Yeah. So the last question is, what's your number one tip for leaders today?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was the hard one. You sent me some questions in prep, and this one I don't know that I had a good one for. I think my number one tip for leaders today is to find their courage. I think we live in really challenging times in a lot of different ways, and I don't think it's going to get easier anytime soon. I think it's going to get way harder before it gets better. Sorry. I'm not, as you can see by my enthusiasm, a pessimistic person. That's just the best assessment I've got on the current situation. If you are a leader in that environment, it takes courage. I don't mean recklessness. I don't mean extremism. I don't mean absolutism. I mean courage. And courage is the ability to follow your desire, to speak truth, to act responsibly when it matters, when it's hard, not just to take the easy route, not to hide, but also the compassion. Being courageous is not an absolutist act. It comes with compassion. That would be my ask of leaders today, not just sort of advice, but my ask, like, please do this. We need this now.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good.
So sorry to end on a somber note.
So where could people hear more about you and contact you?
Yeah. So the easiest thing to do is innovationbound.com/101. And that's the Innovation 101 course, and there are social media links and all the rest of that there. If you happen to be interested in free diving and breath hold diving and the underwater crazy stuff, Instagram's probably the easiest place. And I'm at Ideas and Action on Instagram. So for the fun stuff.
Wow. Thank you, Costa, for your time.
Yeah.
It's been lots of fun, and I enjoy talking with you. So thanks.
You're very welcome, Adi. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. If you want to learn more about what I do, go to invincibleinnovation.com, and I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya. I'm Mazor Kario, and you've been listening to the Invincible Innovation Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, invincibleinnovation.com, where you can learn more about our programs and my book, Innovating Through Chaos. I'll be waiting for you next week in our next episode. Thank you for listening.